Okay. So this is me, and I have a background in science and policy. I was working in the US for some years, and in the last 10 years I've been based in the Middle East. And I'm now providing consulting primarily in the development and humanitarian sectors in the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa, as well as places like Pakistan. Are you still hearing me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Good. So I'd like to just talk with you today, and really thankful that you convened this conference. I think it's an important one to think about the role of faith communities in addressing global challenges, environmental challenges, and the water crisis. At the recent COP27 event, there was a statement issued, I reference it down below on their website, but it was that climate change is disrupting the Earth's natural water cycle, resulting in flooding and droughts, displacing millions of people, negatively affecting access to safe drinking water and agriculture. And so these are problems that affect all of us, and they affect humans. Humans are part of creation, and this harm is being caused both now and it's going to affect future generations. Faith communities, as some other presenters have said, have not sufficiently guided action, and from an ethical stance, we should do that. So I just want to talk a little bit more about this problem. It is related to water scarcity. Water is finite on the earth. And while there are technological advances, there remains many challenges related to accessing sufficient quantity and quality. Part of those problems do relate to water sharing. Again, as some of other speakers well said, water sharing and rights, transboundary issues are significant and require diplomacy. And agriculture, of course, as the largest water use, is related to food security, which is an increasing challenge, as well as energy security, water trading, and virtual water, where foreign nations are purchasing land where there is water that are water rich, and then shipping, exporting products to their lands. This is an issue that we need to consider, and so on. And so finally, it does call us to action, which is the UN's goals of providing water for all people related to poverty reduction, as well as environmental protection, is far behind the progress that they had hoped at this point. So the 2030 goals are far behind for the SDG 6, the Sustainable Development Goal 6. And that's a significant problem for many people around the world, as it's presenting harm as well as future harm. And I'm going to talk more about this idea of where ethics come in, where faith communities come in, and where justice, and what is the place for justice in this. I want to briefly just bring to attention some of the projects I work in places. Like I said, I'm currently in Pakistan, and here in the southern Sindh province, there are large farms, agricultural production, where the Indus River comes through, and the canals for irrigation. And you have the sharecropper landlord system. And of course, unfortunately, with major flooding happening again this year, it caused a lot of displacement. But because of this system of the sharecroppers being regularly moved to work the farm areas, there's underdevelopment for their basic needs. In Yemen, illegal well drilling, limited or minimal mapping of aquifers. Of course, again, with the civil war there, as well as other wars and conflicts, some of this is related to government subsidies and removal of fuel subsidies that were needed for running diesel generators to pump water and produce food. So these are integrated and complex challenges. In Palestine, also you have complex political and legal frameworks regarding water rights. I've been in contact with Dr. Samir Shadid, who's at Najah University in Nablus, and talking about the importance of rainwater. He's done very good work in mapping the potential of rainwater harvesting across West Bank in the different areas. And this is a great solution, but more diplomacy is needed. And more could be said about other least developed countries in sub-Saharan Africa, where statistically greatest needs remain for sanitation and water hygiene. Much of that which was brought to more attention during the COVID crisis, where many communities had limited access to water for hygiene and hand washing. As I said, creation care is including humans as part of that creation, but the climate trends, it's at this point quite well established that there's a linkage between water and climate. Again, COP27 brought that in front of us recently. And I think all of us are seeing these effects of more severe droughts and more severe storm events. Just last week in Jeddah, I think they received about 3 times the average annual rainfall in about a 6-hour period. So it presents challenges for design solutions. How do we create infrastructure that is both affordable and appropriate for now? And how will that affect the future generations and people? Of course, political will, government has a key role in this, but do they have both the will and the capacity to deal with it? Once again, the challenges are complex, but there are so many competing interests, and governments, I believe, do want to do the right thing, but it's very difficult. And yes, of course, there is lack of capacity, as well as corruption in many places that needs to be addressed. But this is where I think the faith community can really make a difference. Now, before I say some things about the role of faith communities, I believe I wanted to touch on some different ethical frameworks. I have training as a certified trainer for human rights-based approach with the UN Environment Program in what's called integrated water resource management. And that says that access to water is a fundamental right, not merely an economic good or commodity, and that managing water resources for ecosystems should be done at the basin level or at river basin levels. And that's the essential task of duty bearers, governments. Rights holders play a part through public participation and collective action. Human rights are important, and yet there are some limitations. The Arab League, I believe, has a version of the Human Rights Declaration that includes a faith orientation. And human right to water serves as the basis for environmental ethics. It's a form of deontological ethics, which is also known as duty theory. And duty theory, in that it states that humans have duty to one another and are inherently worthy of dignity and respect. and again, as part of creation. And actions are good or bad according to a set of rules. And this is from the German philosopher Kant, some hundreds of years ago. Though he wasn't religious, he in fact claimed that reason should govern and not adherence to religious command. So I would say in a faith-based modern construct of this duty theory, religion and holy texts provide a moral mooring, while reason and conscience further guide actions. And then, you know, the world we live in is still, you know, a majority of people do claim to be of a religion and one of the world religions. So we do need to think and continue to think of how to move together towards solutions that include recognition of this moral and ethical and religious framework. I think what's the most important piece is that these motivations or intentions are recognized, and in religion and faith communities, there is this sense of right and wrong and a duty to do what is right. And there's also eternality or a future orientation about benefit and reward. And I think two examples that are profound are in the ideas of good works in Christianity and Sadaqah Jariyah in Islam. And there's a hadith that talks about what the Prophet said is the most, you know, the charity which is best, and it's about giving drinking water. And it is similar to something that was said in the Gospel of Matthew by Jesus about giving a cup of water, and that it doesn't lose reward. So there's a connectivity in these holy texts to and to thinking about the connectivity to the future. So the role of faith communities then, as I wrap up, I think there's kind of five key roles to advocate for good governance at all levels of government, and that's through grassroots efforts and appeals to governing bodies, holding duty bearers accountable, also working together to develop localized action, specific plans to protect and conserve resources, while respectfully acknowledging differences and blind spots with intellectual honesty. We do have different beliefs, and those can be recognized, but also we can work together well despite those. And ensure, a third thing, charitable development is done with excellence and transparency in accordance with humanitarian principles, for example, non-partiality, equality, prioritizing least developed countries and vulnerable groups. Personally, on a personal level, all people should be committed to simple lifestyles, product conscious purchases with these kinds of green labels or water conscious labels. And then collaborating, of course, with non-religious entities is important. So finally, just two slides to talk about this concept, intergenerational justice. It was coined previously by a few different individuals. Rawls talks about the theory of justice and just savings within a utilitarian framework of welfare. And it's a future-oriented set of moral duties and the extent to which the present day generation ought to consider not only its own interests, but also those of future generations. So inherent in this is this idea of sacrifice. And I think the faith communities provide a strong, again, grounds framework for sacrifice and recognition of the value of deferring for the sake of others, for both kin or for neighbors. So finally, intergenerational water justice is about recognizing that we very likely are stealing from our children's children. when we don't realize what we're taking out of the ground, we're over extracting, for example, water out of the ground, with this idea that it's out of sight, out of mind. Our grandchildren, our children's children are too out of sight and out of mind, just like that water is. And so the problems, like I said, over extraction of non-renewable sources, mismanagement, corruption, lack of an infrastructure investment, which does affect future affordability, and non-sustainable development by foreign international NGOs and other actors. So my 4 points to recommend in summary, in closing rather, is to take pragmatic actions today, measure and inventory hidden resources. The science is there to do this. Establish regulatory agencies. There are very few of those across the Arab countries. I think Egypt is one good example where they do have this. But these regulatory agencies can act as bodies that structure pacts for integrity, for capacity building, for enforcement of water rights and water policy. Engage private sector, but ensure that any PPP arrangements are balanced contractually. And then finally, promote greater cooperation globally, because this does require more partnership. Thank you.